Hello. From Wonder Media Network, I'm Jenny Kaplan, and this is Womanica. This month, we're talking about women of science fiction. These women inspire us to imagine impossible worlds, alien creatures, and fantastical inventions, revealing our deepest fears and hopes for the future. Today, we're talking about one of the first women to publish science fiction stories under her own name. Her stories often featured strong female characters on the borders of humanity. Meet Clare Winger Harris. Clare was born in Freeport, Illinois on January 18, 1891. Her mother was the daughter of a wealthy industrialist. Her father was an electrical contractor who also enjoyed creative hobbies like writing. In 1917, he published a novel called The Wizard of the Island, or The Vindication of Professor Waldinger. Clare's future writings in science fiction might have stemmed from her father's interest in the genre. Clare attended Smith College before meeting and marrying her husband, Frank Clyde Harris, in 1912. The couple went on to have 3 children. After a few years of being a housewife, Clare began to write. She published her first novel in 1923, a historical fiction piece called Persephone of Eleusis, a romance of ancient Greece. After her novel, Clare shifted to short stories. A Runaway World was published in the July 1926 issue of Weird Tales under the name Mrs. F.C. Harris. The story begins in the year 2026. It describes the events after Earth is pulled away from its orbit around the sun. Though science fiction works had been published a century before, it wasn't until pulp magazines that the genre became popular. These magazines were cheap and aimed at younger readers. In addition to taking submissions, these magazines included columns where readers could send in their thoughts and critiques of stories. This accessibility to writers helped the genre explode in popularity. In December of 1926, Clare submitted a story for a contest being run by Amazing Stories editor Hugo Gernsback. It was called The Fate of Poseidonia, a space opera about Martians who steal the Earth's water. She came in third, publishing it under her full name, Clare Winger Harris. Hugo was so shocked by her great work that he printed in his editorial, "Women do not make good scientification writers." But the exception, as usual, proves the rule, the exception in this case being extraordinarily impressive. Clare went on to publish short stories in the most famous pulp magazines of the era, Weird Tales, Amazing Stories, and Science Wonder Quarterly. The stories covered various science fiction tropes like space travel and alien invasions. Clare's last story, The Ape Cycle, tells the story of a scientist who alters evolution to make apes smart enough to work for humans. Another character, Melva, questions the experiment's ethics. Eventually, the apes become aware of their unjust treatment and rise up to overthrow the humans. Melva was just one of Clare's female characters who had active roles in her works. Clare stopped her writing in 1930 to focus on raising her children. But as the story goes, her fans missed her so much that one boy wrote a letter asking her to submit a story to his magazine in 1933. She obliged, and her story, The Vibrometer, appeared in the last issue of a short-lived, homespun fanzine called Science Fiction. The pamphlet may have been the last for high school student Jerry Siegel and his friend Joe Shuster, but the pair would go on to create one of the most recognized superheroes of all time, Superman. Eventually, Clare and Frank divorced, and Clare moved out west. In 1947, Clare self-published a collection of her short stories, Away from the Here and Now, Stories in Pseudoscience. Clare died on October 26, 1968, in Pasadena, California. Even though Clare published just a few works in her lifetime, the stories were reprinted over the years, introducing her to new fans. Because she printed works in her name, and because of her embrace of female characters, Clare has been recognized in recent years as a pioneer of women's and feminist science fiction. All month, we're talking about women in science fiction. For more information, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Womanica Podcast. Special thanks to Liz Kaplan, my favorite sister and co-creator. As always, we'll be taking a break for the weekend. Talk to you on Monday.